Warhammer x LOTM, The Black Emperor by author Jiao Chao Mo. Chapter 726-738. Taking tomorrow off, no idea when I'll reach the great birthday celebration. Taking tomorrow off plus when will I reach the great birthday celebration? Exhausted, taking a day off to rest. By the way, many have asked how many chapters remain until the great birthday celebration. I don't outline chapters, I only list plot points, so I can't give an exact count. Before the great birthday celebration, the major battles left are: the Raffin ingredient for the Earl of the Fallen potion, the Iron Halo, snatching the Aurelius that heralds Horus's fall, joining Sanguinius and the harrowing convent in the defense of Suriaret, fighting the Eldar warlock Titan, the rout against the Jingyuan Federation, the Thousand Sons, rout, and word-bearers against the Aven of the Arc Marginal Cluster. With Horus and Sanguinius, assaulting Murder Star to wipe out the giant spider monsters. Under Warmaster Horus, fighting alongside Korax at Door 42. None of these 8 battles will run very long. Chapter 726. The Black Emperor utilizes the rules of the Dusk Moon, eliminating hidden dangers and creating a warrior race. After Nimrod sent the harvested uniqueness of the Twilight Giant to the Nation of Disorder, he did not leave immediately. With a flap of his golden wings, he evaded the thousands of blue-black giant eagles that were swooping in. The Mentor of Disorder gazed at the orange-red rock surface and the blue-black rivers, which were still entwined with complex, layered gray-black lines of rules. The influence the uniqueness exerted on the Dusk Moon did not disappear just because I collected it. Although the Twilight Giant does not possess the Divine Kingdom authority like the Red Priest and the Demoness, it still formed a similar domain on the Dusk Moon, which in turn affected Visa. An image flashed through Nimrod's mind. Millions of years ago, an orange-red giant sword fell from the heavens. As time passed, the cold rocky surface became a shimmering orange-red, and rivers of twilight flowing in blue-black hues began to run across it. As the images flickered in the Primarch's mind, his eyes shimmered. Light and shadow danced, rose, and then instantly extinguished. I still cannot call upon psionics, but the obstruction is no longer that great. Nimrod's body glided, avoiding over a dozen pairs of sharp claws. He raised his right hand and pressed the comm bead in his ear. A static sound indicated that the Vox system was being interfered with. Without a Vox station on the ground, Vox communications would suffer from interference. Nimrod became increasingly certain of his hypothesis and reached a conclusion. The time since the Twilight Giant fell here was beyond counting, and its influence was deeply rooted in the Dusk Moon. For a very long time in the future, this influence would not fade. While Nimrod pondered, he soared upward, shaking off the pursuing giant eagles in an instant. He stopped at an altitude of 10,000 meters and turned to look back. The orange-red light reflecting on Visa's surface had clearly dimmed. Light and shadow flickered in the Primarch's eyes as he once again felt the presence of the warp. He pressed his hand against the comm bead, opened the Vox channel, and contacted Arsena Dunn. Just as he was about to order the Primarch attendant to perform a full-power Auspex scan, he received the report he wanted. My lord, the Auspex scan results show that the oblique orbit of the Dusk Moon has deflected once again. The magnitude of the deflection is not large. It is estimated to take 52 hours and 38 minutes to return to normal orbit. The Augur matrix scan shows that the rock structure has not changed. As I thought, on a physical level, there is no essential change. With Visa losing the influence of the uniqueness, the psychic resistance of future newborns will decay, and the number of untouchables born through lineage inheritance will decrease. The Dusk Moon can serve as a substitute. No, the Dusk Moon was originally the most suitable world. Those born here will have even stronger psychic resistance. Nimrod's brow furrowed slightly, but surviving on the Dusk Moon was too cruel, more dangerous than those death worlds. The Dusk Moon was clearly affected by the uniqueness of the Twilight Giant, becoming a land of decay. People living in this world would suffer both physical and mental torment. Their bodies would wither, and their lifespans would be significantly reduced. Even more cruel was that their souls would lose connection with the warp, making it more uncomfortable than living around an untouchable. It was similar to living within the Pariah Nexus in the Nephilim sector after the Great Rift opened, where people frequently fell into panic or lost consciousness. Every day, the Imperial army was facing a test of will. Nimrod's newly sprouted idea of immigration immediately met with a setback. He could not push millions of people into a death trap, especially considering their lifespans would be drastically shortened, and they could only serve him for a short time. While Nimrod was conflicted, the Primarch attendant's voice sounded again, reporting on the situation on the surface of the planet Visa. My lord, just now when the dusk moon's orbit deflected and the solar eclipse occurred prematurely, the entire planet was enveloped in orange-red light. The apothecaries discovered that pine trees and other plants rotted in a short time, and wild beasts became aged and weak. It is noteworthy that the vital signs of the Visa people did not change significantly. A flash of inspiration struck Nimrod's mind. He suddenly remembered that the main authority of the Twilight Giant, besides dusk, included combat. Among the subordinate authorities derived from combat were strength, giant, and protection. The Visa people are tall and physically robust, clearly also influenced by the uniqueness. The Visa people have evolved under the influence of the Twilight Giant, through the long baptism of time. Nimrod's eyes lit up. Humans who immigrated to the Dusk Moon might also undergo the same evolution over a long period, becoming a race with higher psychic resistance. Although the mortality rate of the immigrants would be very high at the beginning, Nimrod thought of a suitable source: the potentially dangerous populations in various territories. Nimrod pressed his calm beat and order the apothecaries to perform retesting immediately. Enveloped in golden living metal, looking like a golden angel, he flew toward the Wenquan shadow. The next day, in the Primarch office, Nimrod, dressed in a black silk robe, leaned back in his throne. Chief Apothecary Mikkel, clad in black armor, held a data slate and began his report. My lord, the apothecaries have retested the Sobo tribe according to your orders. Their vital signs data has not changed significantly, and their bodies show no signs of aging. Nimrod nodded with a smile. It was exactly as he had expected. The Visa people had adapted to the decay of the twilight through evolution. Life will find a way for evolution. After humans left Terra, they displayed an adaptability that surpassed many races. They survived in all sorts of natural environments: ocean worlds like Nactus, volcanic worlds like Mundus Pyra, even Catachan, which was filled with dangerous flora and fauna, and Fenris, Medusa, and Nocturne, where disasters were frequent and permanent landmasses were rare. The Aeldari relied on their powerful psychic technology to create countless maiden worlds at the peak of their civilization. Although humans did not have such abilities and could only terraform planets on a smaller scale, they relied on their own adaptability to take root in over 1 million worlds. Perhaps it was Einstein, who was once an incarnation of Old Man Huang, who said, "A person's greatest skill is the ability to adapt to the objective world." As Nimrod marveled in his heart, Mikkel continued his report. The psychic resistance of the Visa people has shown a slight increase, with a clear phenomenon where the magnitude of improvement decreases with age. Among 63 boys, 5 rose from Sigma level to Tau level, 2 4-year-olds, 1 5-year-old, 1 6-year-old, and 1 7-year-old. 1 3-year-old rose from Upsilon level to Phi level, 1 2-year-old rose from Phi level to Chi level, and 1 1-year-old rose from Chi level to Psi level. Among adults, only one person rose from Sigma level to Tau level. Nimrod nodded slightly. Indeed, the Visa people evolved under the influence of the Twilight Giant, uniqueness. The long years made their bodies strong and gave rise to psychic resistance. In the past, the annual moon of decay would exert a small influence on them, increasing their psychic resistance, and perhaps even turning unborn children into untouchables. His previous deductions were all confirmed. He looked at the snow-white-haired Primarch attendant and gave his orders. Immigrate the mutants from various worlds of the Legion to the Dusk Moon in batches. Mutants were a massive group within the Empire. From Old Man Huang to the planetary governors of various worlds, and even most Imperial citizens, they were viewed as vermin. Under cruel policies, they harbored hatred for the Empire. During the Siege of Terra, Horus summoned mutants from countless worlds. Hating the Empire, they were the first to be thrown onto the battlefield, greatly depleting the defenders. Under Nimrod's rule, although the number of mutants on worlds like Vostonia and Exemplar City was gradually decreasing and their living conditions had changed, there were still hundreds of millions of mutants struggling to survive on other worlds. Their non-human appearance and unstable emotions naturally led to their rejection. This was especially evident in the heavily populated hive worlds and industrial worlds. Countless mutants gathered in the underhives, struggling to survive, and infiltrated the lower nests to launch attacks. Mutants would become increasingly frenzied under the influence of the Great Birthday celebration and warp storms, making them a potential unstable factor. Among the worlds under Nimrod's rule, by the standards of industrial worlds and hive worlds, there were numerous hive worlds with populations exceeding 1 billion. The million worlds of the Empire were constantly in flux, and their numbers were not fixed, but the proportion generally accounted for 1/10 to 1/4 of the total number of imperial planets. In Nimrod's territory, there were 129 hive worlds. Including the industrial worlds and some worlds under his command that were originally meant to become forge worlds, the number of worlds with populations exceeding 100 million was over 200, slightly less than 1/3 of the total number of worlds. If things continued as they were, the Order Shadows would need to deploy significant defensive forces on these worlds before the Great Birthday celebration. But now, there was an opportunity to resolve this threat. Moreover, the cruel environment of the Dusk Moon was also a new path for the mutants. The authority of Dusk's suppression of supernatural forces would alleviate their mental suffering. Through adaptive evolution, their wills would become resilient. Their descendants, mutations would disappear after dozens of generations, they would develop psychic-resistant traits, and countless untouchables would be born. Their descendants, under the influence of the residual power of the authority of strength and the authority of giant on the Dusk Moon, would become a robust race like the Visa people. Under the influence of the power of the authority of combat, they would fight and kill each other, becoming natural-born warriors. In Nimrod's mind, a vast sea of blood rose. Countless people died in a cruel world and the fires of war, tempering a resilient warrior race. As his eyes shimmered, he issued the command. Provide them with sufficient food and weapons. Nimrod provided the mutants with a dream treatment they would otherwise never have, being full. This was the benefit of their bloody path. As you will. After Arsena took the order, Nimrod thought of the tens of thousands of blue-black giant eagles. Although their bones were clearly not as good as psychic-resistant materials like the skulls of the Sisters of Silence, they still had some value, so he ordered. Dispatch tech marines to the Dusk Moon to collect the remains of the blue-black giant eagles. Nimrod watched the two of them exit the palace and thought silently. The decaying Dusk Moon, a lethal death world, can still be utilized. Eliminate hidden dangers and cultivate a powerful warrior race. The Black Emperor utilizes the rules. Chapter 727, The Galaxy's Premier Weapon. 933. M30. In the third layer of the Nation of Disorder, Nimrod, the Mentor of Disorder, stared at the strands of silk connecting him to the massive sword floating in the gray mist, which shone with an orange-red light. With a thought, he reached out and grasped the greatsword. A powerful force surged within Nimrod's body. As he swung it casually, a booming explosion echoed through the Nation of Disorder. Every swing he made was a materialized manifestation of combat itself. Each strike was more terrifying than the Mentor of Disorder's full-strength attacks using Osber Via. The black mist of the Saphira space was cleaved apart, drifting away before quickly recondensing. Nimrod nodded with a smile. I suppose I now possess the premier weapon in the galaxy. Although Jushin's spear was a divine artifact forged with Old Man Huang's power, even if Nimrod injected all his psychic energy into it, it still fell far short of the Twilight Giant's uniqueness. Relying on the slight connection he had established, Nimrod confirmed that because the Twilight Giant held partial acting authority, the Saphira sensed he was the chosen one and allowed him to exert a portion of the uniqueness's power. Every strike he swung contained the underlying rules of combat, strength, and destruction. However, in the outside world, I usually cannot exert its full power. The Twilight Giant's authority over Twilight would cause everything around it to decay and rot. The Order Shadows who were not Eternals would age, and even weapons and warships would decay. The Twilight Giant's uniqueness was different from the Red Priests, Nimrod's control over it was much weaker. The Twilight Giant only possessed partial acting authority, whereas sacrifice was the primary authority of the Red Priest. Among the three pathways of the Saphira, River of Eternal Darkness, the one closest to the Saphira's true meaning was death, the death pathway uniqueness, the one most like its external form was darkness, but the one that could slightly utilize it was the giant, the Twilight Giant. The acting authority originated from this, meaning the Twilight Giant directly acted for the River of Eternal Darkness and indirectly for other Sephira. The Red Priest, on the other hand, prayed to the source of power, the Sephira, for power or a projection to descend, not limited to the City of Calamity. The Red Priest constantly walked the edge of being corrupted by the Sephira. Any Sephira had a massive impact on him. When Nimrod was in the outside world, he had to use the power of the Nation of Disorder, invoked through acting authority to suppress the Twilight and other authorities. Similarly, he could not use the Twilight Giant to selectively transform targets like the Order Shadows. The Twilight Giant's transformation of targets could only be like before, instinctively releasing power, such as directly affecting the Dusk Moon and indirectly affecting Visa. This would remain the case until his own permissions within the Nation of Disorder were further elevated, allowing him to leverage more Sephira power. Fortunately, the Visa people can meet the needs in the short term, and there will be new populations from the Dusk Moon in the future. I don't need to place the Twilight Giant on some planet and worry about losing it, or spend time influencing a certain race. Nimrod looked into the distance at the rotating black glass. At least, unlike the demoness who is completely beyond my control, I can use the Twilight Giant right now. He withdrew his gaze, let go of the orange-red greatsword, and pulled the shining longsword from his back. The armor forged by Vulcan had been damaged after being decayed by the Twilight Giant. He currently had no suitable armor, so the Val's sword was carried on his back. Old Man Huang had summoned a new war council to be held the next day, and Nimrod decided to ask Ferris then. He had agreed to a duel, and he wanted to know if the armor Ferris was forging for him was completed. Nimrod held the Val's sword horizontally before him, his eyes staring at the shining longsword just a fist's distance away. With the Twilight Giant uniqueness, the importance of the Val's sword, which corresponds to the sequence 2 glory, has decreased significantly for me. Nimrod's mind flashed through the situations of his various subordinates. The Guardian Thierry Vieira had the most robust physique and was physically most capable of wielding the Val's sword. But his psychic power originated from the Kassei sword forging master and was limited to passive use of psychic blades. He could not actively mobilize psychic energy to perfectly unleash the power of the Val's sword. Ethan, of the unyielding lineage, had just been promoted to Dawn Paladin. Using the Val's sword, even as a two-handed greatsword, he wouldn't be able to wield it freely. Nimrod's mind flashed through many subordinates, and finding no one who could perfectly unleash the Val's sword's power, he made a decision. I won't bestow it for now. While pondering, Nimrod let go of the Val's sword, the weapon that had accompanied him since the year 819. The divine weapons forged by the Aeldari god of the forge, Val, of which there were actually only 99, Val's 100 blades, phased out. As Nimrod thought, the Red Priest uniqueness, which was intertwined with the demoness, surfaced on his left shoulder. He took a step forward and returned to the real world. 4 solar hours later, Nelson, the Primarch's private pilot, flew the shadow pattern Stormbird to the highest peak of Visa. The Techmarine had carved out a landing field on the mountain summit. Nelson stared down. The Visa tribes scattered across the mountains were arranged in winding lines like long snakes. The tribal chiefs stood beside each line, with the tribe's second strongest behind them, followed by the rest in order. Small tribes had fewer than 100 people, while large ones approached 1,000. Between the tribes, an order shadow stood every 30 meters, keeping them separated. Even so, Nelson saw the bellicose Visa people brandishing their blades and provoking those around them. Open the hatch. As the hatch hummed open, Nimrod flapped his wings and flew out. On the mountain, only 11 meters from the summit, Etzek leaned against a massive block of black basalt. From his high vantage point, he scanned the black armor warriors across the entire peak. Etzek's pupils widened further and further. Over 1,000. Nimrod actually has so many offspring. At the thought that there were 1,000 people with combat power similar to his own, he instinctively wanted to deny what he saw. A few seconds later, the pragmatic Etzek accepted reality. If Nimrod led his offspring in a swift raid, it was possible they could crush all the tribes before the mutually hostile groups were forced to unite. While accepting the cold reality, a doubt couldn't help but arise. I've only fathered 5, how can he have so many? He doesn't seem like the type of person who spends every day making people. Just as Etzik was pondering the reason, he suddenly sensed something and looked up into the sky. A figure in black robes with golden wings appeared out of thin air, just like the day he had descended from the heavens. Etzik looked up at Nimrod's face, which was like a marble statue, and then noticed that behind him, in addition to the flagpole on his left shoulder, there was now a massive sword on his right shoulder. Etzak's movements drew the attention of those around him, and one by one, the Visa people looked up to gaze at the giant in the sky. The Mentor of Disorder flapped his wings and stood suspended over the summit, speaking with the majesty of the Futhu language. Visa warriors, you are valiant and powerful fighters. I once intended to hire you, but after spending a year with you and truly getting to know you, I have realized that you deserve more. With a thought from the Mentor of Disorder, black mist quietly emerged behind him, clinging to the inner side of the flagpole before spreading to the greatsword. Your descendants will become Order shadows. You will be my blades, like the talons of a giant eagle. Boom. In the eyes of the Visa people, a phantom of a one-eyed giant with knotted blue-black flesh suddenly appeared behind Nimrod. Thud, thud, thud. Across the mountainside, the Visa people involuntarily knelt down in a roar of movement. On the entire black basalt peak, only 14 people remained standing. Nimrod first used the power leveraged from the Nation of Disorder to drive the Red Priest, then mobilized the Twilight Giant, and acted for the Saphira's power. The stacked supernatural forces drove the Twilight Giant to manifest a projection of its mythical creature form. Nimrod did not have the ability, nor did he present a clear and complete mythical creature form of the Twilight Giant, as that might have driven some of the less resolute Visa people insane. He looked around at the nearly 50,000 Visa people with satisfaction, knowing he had saved a massive fortune. A fortune enough to build 3 new expeditionary fleets. A massive fortune that even Malkador, the keeper of the seals, would be greedy for. Nimrod's gaze swept over the 14 people still standing, each of whom held a falcon shortsword. The blue-black giant eagle would descend from the sky to raid every day of decline. It wasn't just Etzak's ancestor, but other tribal leaders had also slain the giant eagle. I wonder if this is related to them being the same as the negative Omega class. After the apothecary tested the 48,300 Visa people, it was discovered that among the untouchables, only 14 reached the negative Omega class required for Culexus assassins. Although their combat power was close to that of the legendary Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn and would not be inferior to a Culexus assassin, they only knew how to instinctively suppress psychic power. Against psychers, even combined, they were far inferior to a single Culexus assassin. While untouchables were the same, they were inferior to Old Man Huang's Sisters of Silence. Even with 7,728 of them together, they were not as good as 100 Sisters of Silence. Etzik raised his falcon shortsword and pointed it at Nimrod. You don't want to pay the reward. Nimrod looked around at the 14 people, including Etzik, and shook his head. I will hire you. I am simply providing you with a new path. To become Order shadows, a path to fight for me. The Mentor of Disorder said in a deep voice, I never fail those who are loyal to me. You will still receive land and wealth. Behind Etzik, a man from the Sobo tribe shouted loudly. I am willing to become your Talon. Shouts followed, I am willing to become your Talon. Nimrod looked down at the Visa people with satisfaction. He had let the Departamento Munitorum try countless times, yet the mercenaries who were unwilling to be loyal to the God Emperor of Terra had surrendered. Who says the Visa people have no loyalty? Etzik and the other 14 looked around. Their tribes, even their wives, their husbands, and their children, were all offering their loyalty to Nimrod regardless of themselves. They pragmatically accepted reality. Etzik said loudly, you promised you would give them the chance to choose. Of course, the Mentor of Disorder said in a deep voice, those who want to be mercenaries, come to the summit, we will discuss the details now. Etzik led the way up, and the tribal chiefs followed with doubt. Etzik walked around the summit and looked down the mountain. 3 minutes later, he found there were only the 14 of them. The Visa people were still kneeling on the black basalt mountain. Chapter 728 Ferris, I suggest you challenge Angron. Atop the black basalt peak, after 3 hours of discussion with 14 tribal chiefs who carried Falcon Short's words, Nimrod reached an accord. With a quill, he wrote line after line of clauses on both sides of the parchment, one in the Dun language, the other in Futhu. The employed, during the term of employment, shall obey the commands of the employer Nimrod and his progeny. The employed must keep all secrets for the employer, and may not divulge to anyone anything seen or heard. The scope includes, but is not limited to, the following: the employer shall prepay with Vostonia pattern lasguns as remuneration for the first year. Nimrod decided to assign the visa among the various chapter elements to make use of the untouchables. Etzak's Sobo tribe would remain aboard the Worthy Shadow. The other 13 Omega-grade leaders of the largest tribes would be distributed across 12 chapters and the librarias. Besides psychic suppression, another major function of the untouchables was to prevent prying eyes. An astropath on active duty carried 2 untouchables precisely for this consideration. The astropath, master of the Imperium's long-range communications, sits at the core like a spider at the center of its web, the convergence point of vital intelligence. Important messages from every system are parsed and then delivered to him. Although the lords and chief priests of each chapter possess the Euclidean sigil, it can only be activated in time aboard their flagship. Elsewhere, advanced preparation is required. Untouchables need only stand within the conference area to block a certain zone, crucial now, on the eve of Chaos's rise, for concealing Legion intelligence. Having untouchables attend librarians is likewise meaningful. Besides gathering data crystals and chapter action archives, they can also suppress rogue psychers. Though all librarians master the 3rd level of the Telema state of mind, and every astropath level librarian is equipped with a servitor, loss of control is still possible in major wars. A servitor may be destroyed by the enemy, and mental defenses can slacken under the fatigue of ceaseless battle and the deaths of battle brothers. The remaining tribes would be assigned to officers, techmarines, chaplains, and others, transferred as needed. Etzak was first to sign his name in Futhu script on the lower right of the parchment, in the employed party's space. Nimrod then took the parchment, and a thought, his spirit surged, pouring into the great sword on his back that blazed orange-red. A shadow fell silently across the parchment. An almost imperceptible line of text appeared between 2 lines of writing. If the employed arrives at a place where time has no meaning, the count shall halt until the service party departs and normal flow resumes, then restart. This clause resembled the one Nimrod had signed in the Shadow Side's 2nd layer with the Harud Damien. Though he had yet to master Beander powers of Shadow, possessing the uniqueness of the Twilight Giant path allowed him to enact a shadow contract on another's behalf. Nimrod raised his hand and signed his name at the bottom left, Nimrod. The instant his pen lifted, both his and Etzak's bodies trembled slightly. The Mentor of Disorder saw their shadows leap up behind them, as though looking down from a height. In an indescribable sensation, the two formed a subtle bond. Etzak's body shook. He sensed that should he breach the contract, he would suffer a dire punishment, death. He looked around and saw nothing. Etzak caressed the falcon shortsword returned to his waist, quelling the unease in his heart. He would honor the mercenary pact. Whether the feeling had been real or not, he would not break his word. After signing contracts with the 14 chiefs, Nimrod returned to the Worthy Shadow. The next day his psychic projection spanned countless light years, descending upon the Golden Palace of Terra. Malkador had not arrived, Angron was absent. Clad in a black robe, Nimrod stood out among the 18 armored Primarchs. Perturbo's stone-like voice carried concern. Nimrod, your armor. When we brought the feral world to compliance, catastrophe struck mid-battle and my armor shattered. Nimrod spoke calmly, attributing the fracture of his armor to the Twilight Sword's dusk authority rather than to himself. Given that the Visa would fight alongside every chapter and could not be hidden, he would report the compliance action to the War Council and take the opportunity to file 2,584 Order Shadows Fallen. Perturbo nodded, recalling how, during the salvation of Dawn Star, he and Magnus had reversed a magnetic anomaly. In the end they learned that core decay had been caused by the warp entity Sheetan manipulating the Red Dragon cult. His ice-blue eyes rippled like a lake as he remembered braving the treacherous galactic core with Nimrod and Magnus to bring the squats into compliance. A gleam flared in Russ's eyes. Nimrod's broken armor proved he was not invincible. He grew ever surer he could find a way to defeat Nimrod in the underrealm of Fenris, though the price in Rune Priests' lives had been steep. Unless Nimrod turned traitor, but that would never happen. He was loyal to the All-Father. A blush touched Vulcan's cheeks. The Order Shadows built fortress-class energy shields for worlds of lethal environments, yet the armor he had forged for Nimrod had been ruined. He clenched his fists. I shall forge tougher armor for Nimrod. Ferrus Manus's coin-bright eyes studied the drifting robe of Nimrod. Nimrod, the armor I forged for you is complete. I met my first defeat. I learned much in that duel, and it has made me more perfect. Horus Lupercal and Sanguinius exchanged glances, reading the same thought in each other's eyes, only they could defeat Nimrod. Lion L. Johnson and Jagatai Khan regarded Nimrod with the detachment of swordmasters. Ferrus was stronger than Russ, yet Nimrod had beaten him, displaying once more his transcendent might. Rabute Gilliman recalled the statues he had raised on Macragge for the 5 Dreadnought brothers. Nimrod had defeated 2 of the other 4, hot-blooded Russ and unshakable Manus. Nimrod was indeed the pivotal figure among the dreadful host. Conrad Kurz hugged his arms with bat-folded wings, black nails drumming restless, gloomy taps upon his armor, a shadow settled over the dark river. That perfection shows in the forging, said Ferrus, raising his silver arm as liquid metal flowed. After losing to Nimrod, Ferrus had buried himself in the forge, delving into the strength of his silver hands. He had crafted more perfect armor. Silver-haired Fulgrim gazed at Manus, his leaden words breathing the heat of a blazing furnace. Manus savored defeat, he relished loss in competition. From it he found the way to make himself more perfect. Perhaps I should accept Manus's challenge, Fulgrim hesitated. But if I lose, my perfection will be flawed. Ferrus, I suggest you challenge Angron, Nimrod said with a smile. Having risen to Earl of the Fallen, the right required him to slay 2 great targets, Angron and Fulgrim. Fulgrim feared defeat, the ruin of his perfection would make him refuse any challenge. Angron would never turn down a fight. Whichever way the battle went, Ferrus would forge a weapon for Angron. If Nimrod then chose to slay Angron, he would gain another trophy. Choosing Fulgrim is fine too, sooner or later I'll meet the ascended Angron, kill him then and take the trophy. Kraken's Bite, Winter Axe, and the Val's Sword. Many of my progeny stand ready to advance to Sequence 4, still far to go. Nimrod's gaze deepened, Ferrus's coin eyes turned. An excellent suggestion. Rumble. The gates of the Golden Palace swung open. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Chapter 729. Nimrod's ambition burns fiercely, a chance to seize the supreme forge world of Valia. The Emperor walked side by side with the Mars Forge director into the Golden Palace. Behind them followed the Keeper of the Seals, Malkador, and Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, Constantine Valder. After accepting the court's salutes, the Emperor surveyed the assembly, finally settling his gaze on the Mars Forge director, and spoke in a deep voice. Within the Iron Ring lie many forge worlds. Once Mars established contact, Glia, Calabax, and Erdish submitted and formed an alliance with Mars. With their support, the Crusade fleet's advance through the Iron Ring has seen most worlds surrender smoothly, yet the Hydronox conclave of Supreme Valia remains obstinate and has rejected our demands. Mechanical tendrils rose behind the Mars Forge director, and a hololithic star map materialized above the long table. As the tendrils moved, the Iron Ring sector magnified, appearing before the gathered Primarchs. Nimrod knew at once why Old Man Huang had convened this war council, Supreme Valia in the Iron Ring. The Iron Ring lies in the galactic southwest, stretching from the Typing Star territory to the Storm Zones. Founded during the Age of Strife, the many Forge worlds were isolated for millennia of old night, ignorant of anything beyond their own mechanical realms, causing ever greater cultural divergence between them. Glia, one of the future 8 great Forge worlds, allied with Nimrod and forged a mutually beneficial pact with Mars. The 3 Titan legions provided by Glia, Calabax, and Erdish supported the Imperium's expansion through the Iron Ring. In the later Great Crusade, the Imperium encountered Supreme Valia of the Storm Zones. That Forge world sought to demonstrate its might through war, hoping to win better terms in negotiation. A rational choice, but only if one possesses sufficient strength. Nimrod recalled that, after a few weeks under the Raven Guard's onslaught, Supreme Valia had been forced once again to treat with Mars. While pondering this, he saw Old Man Huang's gaze settle upon him. Nimrod, My Pegasus, you shall enlighten the sages of Supreme Valia and bring them into the Imperium. Nimrod remembered that, after Supreme Valia signed the treaty and submitted to Mars, the news failed to reach the Morning Star Titan Legion in time, costing Valia several vital forged cities and countless lives. That consequence, born of ignorance, not malice, left the name Glia a hated byword in the memories of Supreme Valia's people. Decades later, that hatred erupted, directly pushing Supreme Valia to Horus's side. Pointless hatred, but an opportunity. If I lead this war, I can both shield my ally Glia and seize this forge world for myself. When the iron scourge of Great Birthday Celebration sweeps the Iron Ring, I can secure still more forge worlds. Supreme Valia is far weaker than mighty forge worlds like Glia, well within my ability to control. Yet Valia is not feeble, a forge world commanding 20-odd systems, it is a solid anchor within the Iron Ring. Nimrod's ambition blazed, thinking of seizing Supreme Valia, he accepted the command with pleasure. By thy will. Nimrod rose with the other Primarchs, saluted Old Man Huang, and was about to end the psychic projection when a leaden voice sounded. Nimrod, Ferrus Manus's silver eyes fixed upon him, I will deliver your armor to the battlefields of the Iron Ring. Nimrod smiled and inclined his head. I look forward to receiving your work. He ended the psychic projection, his consciousness returned to the body aboard Wenquan Shadow. Pressing a Vox bead, he summoned Arsene Adun. Moments later, seated upon his throne, Nimrod instructed his Primarch attendant. Assemble the 2nd and 10th battle groups at the Carium Gate. He chose the 10th for its size and its many former faceless ones. Gardinal's tripodal walkers, built for the 2nd battle group, were the best counter to Valia's Reaver Titan legions. Of course, he would not expend his own legion. Besides Glia's Morning Star Titans, he would summon another ally. Send a request to Wangquan No. 8. The Dark Fire Titan Legion must render aid per our pact. Nimrod resolved to use this chance to corrupt the Dark Fire Titan Legion's commander, binding him in fealty. With the King of Ruin following Horus, completing the corrosion before Great Birthday Celebration was essential. By thy will. Arsena, silver-haired, recorded the commands on a data slate. Have the Chief Navigator plot a course for World 33 to 59. With 2 battle groups and the Dark Fire Titans needing time to assemble, he would first visit another world in the Antimachus sector to claim a divinatory fragment of Belliker's relic. Acknowledged. The attendant folded the slate and, before leaving, added, My lord, Ivers Yovan waits in the reception chamber for your summons. Nimrod nodded. Let him enter. With a thought, the space monkeys of the Nation of Disorder's first tier began brewing the doctor potion using ginkgo leaves and other ingredients. Arsena strode past Etzik, chieftain of the Sobo tribe, and exited the Primarch office. Before he even stepped inside, Ivers felt his throat dry, every breath tasting of copper. He inhaled, suppressing the discomfort, and entered the Primarch office. Ivers saw a towering brute, shorter than Order Shadows but taller and stronger than any Solar Auxilia soldier. A Los rifle was slung across his back, a short sword hung at his hip. The hilt bore a lifelike eagle's head. Ivers knew at once he was Visa, the source of his revulsion. He forced his gaze from the Visa and focused on Lord Nimrod. Lord, I have read the apothecary's report as you commanded. Nimrod inclined his head. With a flick of his palm a pale green, crystal-clear potion appeared. Drink. Nimrod had no qualms about Etzak's presence. Visa mercenaries from the Segmentum Obscurus were as loyal as any devotee of the God Emperor, bound further by a shadow contract. Ivers eagerly took the vial. Uncorking it, he breathed an enticing scent. Thank you, my lord. He tilted the potion back and drank. On his first day as bodyguard, Etzik stood vigilant just inside the Primarch office door, ready to counter any assault. He could not understand their words, but saw Ivers drink a pale green draught. Nimrod gave that man something. As the potion touched his tongue, Ivers felt as if he were in Ryan, tasting tender shoots of mandrake steeped in morning dew. He swiftly shook off the rapture, calm as during countless surgeries on Solar Auxilia troopers, meditating to contain the potion's surging power. Nimrod regarded the new Sequence 8 doctor and commanded. Your task is to oversee visa conversions of Upsilon and Phi grades. Apothecaries supervising attendants could handle Sigma and Tau grades with little risk, but Upsilon and Phi carried significant failure rates. Only Ivers Yovan, former chief medical officer of the Solar Auxilia and now a doctor, could manage those cases in time. Chapter 730, Nimrod, never heard of him. Antimatter Secondary Star Zone, World 33-59. After successfully submitting to the Hive world, black transport ships descended from the sky, disgorging their cargo. Legion servants, following the orders of the sovereign, drove ant-burrowing machines into the sea of sand between the Hive cities. The squats also responded to Nimrod's request, deploying Sagittor ATVs. After receiving their mission, 2 Sagittor ATVs drove out from the heavy steel doors of Hive City No. 3. The Sagittor formation used by the Squat Alliance during exploration was identical to the 2 vehicle coordination tactics used in combat. The 2 vehicles drove down a mountain of trash piled with steel residue, heading toward the target rune's localized area. The young Squat driver, visiting a Hive world for the first time, looked out curiously. The massive curved surface on the inner side of the annular lighting system refracted dazzling light under the sun's rays, shining like diamonds and illuminating the Hive city shrouded in brown smoke and yellowish exhaust fumes. Under the reflected light, the 2 Sagittors driving side by side sped down the slope of steel residue and entered the main road leading to the shantytowns surrounding the Hive city. Industrial sludge had turned into a mire after countless vehicles repeatedly drove over it, and sewage poured from the Hive city flooded the ground, surrounded by dilapidated and filthy buildings. The squat checked the images captured by the sensors on the video screen. To the west of the shantytown, the ridges of the Hive city buildings undulated, with the light of countless street lamps decorating the trash mountains. To the east of the shantytown was its agricultural processing plant, where chimneys and workshops were stacked together, and filth-ridden fungi grown in sludge were harvested and piled into mountains. To the south of the shantytown, on the lush farm, plains, several giant harvesters assembled from structures of various origins looked like motley colored beetles. Drainage pipes were lined up behind the harvesters like tails, emitting not the sound of flowing water, but a series of thuds. Atomized clumps of mixture were sprayed into the atmosphere, condensing into sticky raindrops that fell. The slimy rain splattered across the entire shantytown. Both drivers let out shouts of disgust simultaneously as they lost their visual field and sensor images. Boom, boom. The wheels roared as the emergency brakes were applied. Amidst the flashing green runes, the waste ejectors activated. After dozens of seconds, visibility was restored. Inside the Sagittor ATV on the left, the driver was about to start the vehicle when he saw a naked woman standing in front of it. Where her navel should have been, there was a wide open mouth that rotated as she writhed. In the Sagittor on the right, a man with a swollen body and bloodshot eyes appeared. He spat out a long, pitch-black tongue that coiled among his mouth full of viscous, rotten teeth. On the video screen, people covered in pale yellow barbs walked around a brazier. From the dim vents emerged people with abnormally bloated features and sturdy muscles covered in folds. From each of them, glaring yellow runes rose. Those were warning runes for radiation signals. Every person was a radiation source. Prepare for an attack. After alerting the warriors on board, they issued a warning over the preset communication channel using the local language transmitted by the Order Shadows. We are heading to the wasteland zone by order of Lord Nimrod. Move aside immediately. Nimrod. Among the crowd of mutants, a horned mutant with a massive head let out a strange hiss through an artificial vocal implant. Never heard of him. As he hissed eerily, the sensors flared with a dense cluster of flickering yellow runes. With countless types of radiation mixed together, he looked more like a monster than a human. He held a foul-smelling firearm assembled from junk in one hand and carried a rusted greatsword in the other, while an extra curled arm on his back gripped a spiked club. He was densely covered in swollen fish scales and bony plates, resembling an upright crocodile. The thick spiked club looked exceptionally heavy, studded with dozens of nails and sharp spikes embedded between them. The 14 eyes hanging all over his face blinked in unison, his green pupils greedily eyeing the 2 vehicles he had never seen before. The mutant twirled the spiked club, his fleshy nose twitching. This and that, stay. You, pass. Following his words, hundreds of mutants with severely cracked skin surrounded the Sagittors in layers. Both drivers simultaneously pressed the controls for the twin bolter cannons at the front, and a dense barrage of fire erupted, striking the grotesque bodies. Grotesque horse-like faces exploded, and twisted, deformed bones and fused soft tissues splattered. Roar. The scale-covered crocodilian giant spat a flurry of bullets from its left arm, which slammed into the steel hull and immediately ricocheted off. Boom. The heavy spiked club slammed into the sagittor on the right, creating a crack in a hull capable of withstanding devastating plasma explosions. Nearly solid slime seeped into the cockpit, and the stench of liquefied cellulose flooded in. Decomposing plant fibers mixed with metal shards drifted down, dripping onto the void suits and making a crackling sound. Several finger-sized holes were burned into the squat's chest by the corrosive slime. Gritting his teeth, he slammed on the accelerator. Rumble. Rotting fence boards shattered, and the ugly shanties collapsed with a crash. The mutants drooled as they roared, frantically chasing after the sagittors. The scaled crocodilian giant sprinted, brutally knocking aside over a dozen mutants, while the curled arm on his back swung rapidly, hurling the massive spiked club. Boom! The heavy spiked club whistled through the air and slammed into the top of the left sagittor. Clang! With a dull thud, the high-energy beam cannon crashed to the ground. The scaled crocodilian mutant let out a triumphant roar, dropped his junk gun, and ran to pick up the high-energy beam cannon. Prepare for an explosion. The driver shouted a warning, pressing his hand on the deep red button of the remote weapon station. Blinding red runes flared up. A blinding light enveloped the two sagittors. Rumble. In a massive explosion that sounded like a landslide, countless mutants were torn to shreds. The shantytown churned as if a giant python were rolling over. Foul-smelling sludge, dilapidated houses, and decaying machinery soared into the sky and slammed against the armored hulls. The two sagittors lurched out, the video screen reflecting the crocodilian giant, whose body had been melted into a pinkish, fleshy mass. Leaving the shantytown behind, the two sagittors disgorged their respective passengers, 5 Forge-kin warriors wearing void suits. As the Forge-kin warriors stepped onto the sand crystal ground, a stream of information immediately flashed on their helmets. Corrosive industrial sand crystal. Corrosive threat rating, medium. Toxicity rating, medium. The Forge-kin warriors glanced at the warning information and paid it no mind. Their void suits were designed for various extreme environments and could handle the toxic sand seas of the wasteland zone. What they needed to be wary of were those grotesque humans. Their radiation-induced mutations posed a significant threat. Within the defensive perimeter, the two drivers quickly repaired the damaged sagittors and set out once more. The sagittors sped across the boundless sand sea, the target rune's distance rapidly decreasing. When the numbers rapidly shrank to 0.9 kilometers, a strange hiss abruptly rang out. The sound echoed, accompanied by a sickening, sticky sensation, as if bloated, tumor-like tentacles were burrowing into their brains. Enemy. The driver quickly glanced at the video screen only to see a field of red light. It was as if they had stumbled into a crimson swamp. Bang! Bang! The two sagittors were swept up and thrown by a massive force, colliding in midair with a thunderous crash. Amidst the shock, the control interface of the previously damaged vehicle went pitch black. Inside the other Sagittor's cockpit, red and yellow runes flickered amidst explosive sparks. The driver slammed his fist onto the emergency rescue rune on the panel, and a bright red pillar of light suddenly shot up, piercing the murky clouds. Boom! Boom! The two Sagittors spun and crashed into the sand sea. The world spun before the Forge-kin warriors' eyes, and screams echoed within their skulls. Pale-faced, they crawled out of the vehicles and raised their bedrock pattern bolters, intending to attack the assailants. The hunter modules of their void suits showed no response. There were no enemies. 8 Forge-kin warriors immediately surrounded the Sagittor vehicles, while the other two began rescuing the drivers. Silently, a shadow emerged beneath the feet of one Forge-kin warrior. Whoosh! The shadow suddenly rose, and whirling invisible blades tore through the void suit layer by layer, peeling away the squat's tough flesh to reveal white bone. Ah! The Forge-kin warrior, being sliced apart by the shadow blades, let out a piercing cry. The 7 other Forge-kin warriors quickly scanned their surroundings. The hunter modules still showed no response. A shadow rose beneath another man's feet, grabbing his shadow. Swoosh! The Forge-kin warrior was violently pulled down, his legs sinking into the sand sea. He turned his bedrock pattern bolter and fired a dense barrage into the ground between his feet with a roar. Boom boom boom, the other 6 Forge-kin warriors aimed around him and fired into the sand sea. Amidst the roaring, sand crystals splattered as the Forge Kin warrior rapidly sank. Two Forge Kin warriors rushed over, grabbed his body, and pulled with all their might. Boom! The sand sea suddenly collapsed like a giant mouth, swallowing the three of them. The four remaining Forge Kin warriors looked around. In the silence, dust and sand swirled. Boom! A sudden, massive boom exploded out of thin air, and they all turned their muzzles in unison. Chapter 731, Belliker's Eye of Shadow. Etzik leapt down from the hovering shadow-patterned stormbird, hitting the sand sea and instantly sensing danger. Four short but robust figures raised weapons similar to those of the Order Shadows, but much smaller, and aimed at him. He rolled quickly and spoke calmly, "Etzik, mercenary for Lord Nimrod." During the voyage, Etzik had used his free time to quickly learn about everything around him. He had learned about the Primarchs and Nimrod's status. Etzik pragmatically accepted calling his employer Lord. Like the others, he had also mastered the fleet's common Vostonian through study and could communicate basically. The squats immediately understood what Etzik meant when they heard his words. The 100-year-old squats of the Squat Alliance had all mastered Vostonian through close trade relations with the Order Shadows. When the Forgekin and Ironkin of the newly born Squat Alliance were created, the Ancestor Corps implanted Vostonian into their minds. "There's a monster here, he can turn invisible," a Forgekin warrior shouted. "That's exactly why I'm here." Etzik drew his falcon shortsword. After receiving librarian training from the Order Shadows, he already understood the enemy Nimrod had hired him to target, the Psykers. Etzak's eyes, like those of a raptor, scanned the sand sea through his eyepieces. Through contact with the librarians, he had gained experience. The direction that made him feel disgusted and uncomfortable was where the Psyker was located. Etzik looked around, his eyes suddenly twitching, and he immediately lunged forward. Rat-tat-tat. His skin felt itchy and painful, as if stung by insects. Etzik became even more certain that the Psyker hiding in the darkness was in that direction. Ah! A shrill scream suddenly rang out, sounding like poultry being gripped by the neck. A figure, seemingly draped in a veil, grew out of the shadows of the crystal sand. He dropped the staff made of piled white bones and clutched his head in pain. Layers of differently colored flesh grew on his body, fluttering like pairs of butterfly wings. His wings and body were densely covered with eyes. As the eyes blinked, faint phantoms scattered around. As the negative Omega-class Etzik rapidly approached, the mutant Psyker's screams grew more miserable, as if he were being tortured. His body burst with a crackle, and foul, thick blood gushed out. Bang! Countless eyes all over his body exploded amidst flickering shadows, and a slimy tentacle shrouded in shadow shot out from his chest, heading straight for Etzik. Boom boom boom. The Forgekin warriors angrily pulled their triggers, and a dense rain of bullets hit the shadow tentacle. The diamond-tipped bullets seemed to pass through the invisible shadow, whizzing past. Etzik raised his falcon shortsword, and a shining light sword and pierced into the hazy shadow. Boom! With a blast, the gray, slimy tentacle exploded. As the Psyker roared, his wrinkled headscarf burst, revealing a massive eyeball at the top of his skull. The eyeball slid down eerily, rolling in an instant to his featureless face. His arms twisted and coiled, lashing out like vines. As his eagle-like nails flicked, streaks of shadow rose up. The shadows grew rapidly, dancing like giant pythons. The shadow pythons lunged at Etzik. When they were still 2 meters away, the Forgekin's hunter modules suddenly flared with locking runes, and they immediately seized the opportunity to pull their triggers. Boom boom boom. Amidst the corrosive acid mist, the shadow pythons were blasted into clouds of gray mist, and dark, gray worms fell onto the crystal sand with a crackle. Etzik strode forward, his falcon shortsword whirling and slashing with fluid grace. In a series of explosions, clouds of gray mist burst apart, and charred gray worms scattered. He rushed in front of the mutant Psyker. Etzik lunged and twisted his waist, piercing the falcon shortsword into the single eye, the hook tip of the blade sliding. Rumble! The mutant Psyker exploded into a cloud of gray shadows, which then shattered and drifted away like a broken mirror. The 4 Forgekin warriors stared at the scattered charred worms, let out a sigh of relief, and then looked scrutinizingly at the giant man holding the short sword. Their hunter modules had been completely unable to capture the strange Psyker. It was only Etzak's arrival that forced him to reveal himself from the shadows. Their weapons had also failed to cause any substantial damage to the strange psyker. Etzik gripped his falcon shortsword and walked past the squats. He felt that there was something in the dust and sand ahead. Silently, a dark gray mist rose up like a curtain. Sting, sting, sting. Etzak's skin stung, and his sallow skin turned much paler. A sour, foul smell drifted into his nostrils through the respirator. His hand, tightly gripping the falcon shortsword, seemed to be covered with squirming maggots. Etzik glanced at his arm, saw nothing, and then continued forward. Crack! With a crisp sound, an invisible eggshell shattered, and a gray building suddenly appeared. A nest tower. Thoughts of his reward flashed through Etzak's mind. He was certain the gray building before him was Lord Nimrod's target. His eyes flickered as he pressed the communicator at his throat. 2 solar hours later, a black Aquilus shuttle descended from the sky. Nimrod, dressed in black robes with his golden wings folded, stepped off the deck. His gaze swept over Etzik, and a black spot reflected in his eyes. With every step Nimrod took forward, the black spots in his eyes became more frequent. He ascended into the Telemaria First Realm, suppressed a slight sense of discomfort, and looked at the hazy gray building. The gray building was generally an ellipsoid, like an egg spread out on the crystal sand. In the Mentor of Disorder's eyes, streaks of gray lines of rules converged into a gray eyeball. My thanks to you, this is exactly the place I was looking for, Nimrod said to the squats. The 2 pilots and the 6 remaining Forge-kin warriors struck their chests with their hands. The squats are happy to serve you, the oath of the covenant is unbreakable. Nimrod stopped and raised his hand to lightly strike his rock-like body. The oath of the covenant is unbreakable. After the squats left, he strode toward the temple. Etzik followed closely behind him, as if entering the door of a nest tower. The Mentor of Disorder, Nimrod, followed the veins of the gray threads, passed through the domed door, traversed the gray rocks, and came before a massive statue. On a base carved from skulls, massive bat-like wings spread out, casting a shadow that covered the entire gray statue. His massive right claw held a greatsword. Spikes protruded from the edges of his body. Curved ram horns extended upward from the top of his head. Etzik followed the black-robed giant closely and looked up. A foul stench permeated the air, and he felt as if he were falling into a mire. The gray stone left eye suddenly blinked. Cold sweat broke out on Etzak's forehead, and his falcon shortsword felt burning hot. Amidst the mixture of ice and fire, a thick gray mist surged like syrup. Whoosh! He saw the black armored giant suddenly soar up, reaching a level even with the statue in an instant. Nimrod raised his right arm and grabbed for the statue's left eye. Roar! Amidst the illusory rising dust and flickering shadows, a roaring face was revealed. From his split chest, a long tongue whipped out. The gray left eye shot out a dancing shadow. With a thought, the Mentor of Disorder's spirituality gushed out. The long tongue suddenly snapped back, striking the sharp teeth of the split chest. The dancing gray shadow dissipated into scattered spots, drifting chaotically. Nimrod's right hand grabbed the statue's left eye, and with a sudden surge of strength, he tore it out. As the gray eye entered his hand, shadows darted, and it seemed as if streaks of Eldar shuriken were exploding. With a thought, black mist suddenly rose from Nimrod's palm, wrapping the gray eye in layers. In the next instant, the gray eye abruptly disappeared. Nimrod looked down at the 7th layer of the Nation of Disorder, where streaks of black lines of rules were wrapped layer upon layer around the gray eye. Belliker's left eye, his eye of shadow. Although not as good as the blade of shadow, it is still a relatively large piece of the holy relic fragments. Phew! Etzik took a deep breath, exhaling a foul stench. Etzik, Hive City 1, the Iari family's nest tower belongs to you now. The Iari family was one of the families that resisted submission. Their family assets had already been taken over by the Order Shadows, and the nest tower was Etzak's reward for completing the mercenary mission. Nimrod opened the Vox channel and instructed Arsena Dun. Send all the mutants of this world to the Dusk Moon. Chapter 732, The Mutants, Bloody First Day on the Dusk Moon. 934. M30. In the antimatter secondary star zone, Visa system, black ships transitioned from real space one after another. Frigates and destroyers fanned out around the transport fleet at the center of the formation. Within the 52 whale-like transport ships, the apothecaries of the Order Shadows looked down upon the layers of decks. During the 5-week voyage, Following the Gene Father's orders, they selected the most unique individuals from the ever-changing masses, extracted their biological tissues, and enriched the gene bank with the research data. The apothecaries experimented with thousands of drugs simultaneously, gathering feedback. They pulled the levers in unison. As runes shimmered, a pale green, mint-scented gas was released into the decks. A crocodile-like mutant, covered in dense, swollen fish scales and bony plates, was the first to wake. The 14 eyes hanging across his face opened one by one. He looked around in a daze, fragmented images flashing through his chaotic mind. Dim yellow smog shrouding the shantytowns. Cold operating tables, drugs injected into limbs time and again. Needles piercing his body, the milky white liquid filling every part of him with strength. Restless roars broke the crocodile mutant's memories as mutant after mutant on the deck regained consciousness. The mutant next to him had severely cracked skin on his ears, resembling worn-out palm leaf fans. Hearing the harsh sound of the female mutant beside him flicking her tongue, he swung his fist and smashed it against the long tongue covered in eyes. Get lost. The crocodile mutant surged to his feet. He was at least 3 heads taller than any of the mutants around him. His massive fist struck 2 mutants, sending them flying dozens of meters into the crowd. The crocodile mutant felt a pain in his fists he had never experienced before, and he pulled them back to inspect them. The fish scales were crooked, and the skin clung shriveled to the bony plates. A blinding light suddenly flashed. He remembered the glare that erupted after he had grabbed that large gun. He had survived the explosion, but his body had grown weaker. Roar, roar, roar. The surrounding mutants gathered, their muzzles fused together, drooling incessantly as they bellowed. A harsh sound suddenly rang out, and a deep voice emerged from the speakers on the walls. Mutated humans. In the past, you were treated as pests, driven outside the hive cities to wait for death, turning into monsters amidst viscous chemical waste and foul industrial exhaust. Now, the sovereign of Vostonia, the Great Primarch, Lord Nimrod, grants you a chance at a new life. The crocodile mutant heard a familiar name, Nimrod. The voice that had come from those 2 sophisticated machines he had never seen before. The mutants opened their mouths, revealing rows of sticky, rotten teeth, and roared loudly. Bullshit Grace. To hell with, Lord. Shit Nimrod, tell him to. ... The apothecary heard the foul language, opened the communication channel, and issued an order to the sound array master. Adjust the frequency, switch to the high treble band. High-frequency sonic waves based on Nephilim research blared, echoing between the layers of decks. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Their deformed bodies shuddered violently, and the mutants collapsed one after another, lying powerless on the deck. Tens of seconds later, across the decks of the entire warship, the mutants were huddled together. The deep voice spoke again. You are about to be sent to a new world, where you will survive in a cruel environment. You will receive food, real food, not the fungi grown in chemical waste and industrial sludge that you ate in the past. Now, you may begin your experience. Today's food is nutrient paste. Clatter, clatter went the mechanical sounds as robotic arms extended from above. Pop, pop, pop. A series of transparent bottles tumbled down with a clink. Bang. A bottle landed in front of the crocodile mutant, a faint aroma wafting from it. Instinctively, he reached out a trembling arm, gripped the bottle, popped the lid, and slammed the liquid into his mouth. Liquid and something like crystalline sand slid down. It wasn't like viscous syrup. There was no bitter, strange metallic taste. No taste of rotten, moldy fungi. Gulp. He roared, his throat vibrating. His 14 eyes widened. It was delicious. The aroma spread, and mutant after mutant, drooling, lunged for the bottles filled with nutrient paste. 15 solar hours later, a black transport ship hovered in low orbit over the surface of the dusk moon, the moon of Visa Prime. Rope ladders were cast down like spiderwebs, electricity crackling as it drove the mutants to tumble and fall rapidly. Bang! The crocodile mutant was the first to hit the orange-red surface. He bounced up immediately as if he had been dropped into a scalding cauldron. The third eye on the right side of his face burst like a swelling blister, pus spraying with a sizzling sound. The extra arms on his back flailed wildly before hanging limp like tails. The scales on his body fell away like dross, revealing a shriveled form. The mutant with the cracked, fan-like ears, and the female mutant with eyes on her tongue scrambled up from the scorching surface, only to see the tall mutant unable to even straighten his back. They let out a strange cry and charged from both sides toward the mutant whose scales had fallen off. Get lost. The mutant raised his right fist and struck at the male mutant's parched ears. His shriveled skin rapidly became desiccated. It seemed as though he had aged over a decade in just a few breaths. His fist smashed into the bloated ear. With a squelch, pus splattered onto his fist. The mutant grinned savagely, the reversal of power making him let out a triumphant roar of enjoyment. He threw a sudden punch, hitting the bony plates. Thud, thud, thud. Bony fragments scattered, and the shriveled, desiccated skin hit the orange-red ground, suddenly igniting into dim flames. Eyeballs rolled out like glass marbles, turning to stare at the woman who arrived late. The woman suddenly bent down, her tongue darting out like a snake's to coil around a scalding eyeball. You're dead. The male mutant roared, swinging his fist down. The female mutant rolled to dodge, crashing with a clang into a crate that had fallen from the sky. Bang! The surface of the crate popped open, revealing the axes and longswords inside. The female mutant quickly drew a longsword and slashed at the pursuing mutant. 50 transport ships were scattered in the low sky of the dusk moon. They did not land on the surface of the orange-red celestial body, but continuously lowered rope ladders and used electric shocks within the decks to drive the mutants out. One transport ship, in a higher orbit, dropped crates filled with weapons. Another transport ship dropped crates filled with nutrient paste, equipped with cushioning airbags. It also dropped Uveha from Attila and green catachan wolves in areas with sparse life signals. Amidst the sounds of bursting airbags, the moment hundreds of Uveha hit the ground, their thick fur drifted away in a mess like willow catkins. A mutant with a rhino horn saw the green four-legged beast and lunged toward it with eyes gleaming. The catachan wolf snarled and leapt, its green form turning into a blurry afterimage. The mutant swung a large axe down, hacking into the orange-red ground with a thud. With a rustling sound, the green shadow pounced onto him, its crimson maw opening as foul-smelling pus and blood splattered. The mutants took weapons from the crates and charged at nearby mutants, fighting for more food and seizing more weapons. Blood mixed with mutated pus, spilling onto the orange-yellow rocky surface. 4 million of the most severely mutated mutants lost the great strength they had gained from mutation amidst their decay, becoming the majority of those who died on the first day among the first inhabitants of the dusk moon. As the light of the red star shone upon the orange-red surface, the mutants shouted at the top of their lungs, swarming frantically toward the crates falling from the sky. They brandished their weapons and rushed toward the food promised by the man named Nimrod. Chapter 733, Ferris's superb forging skills. Wangquan Shadow, 3rd level. Nimrod picked up the cooled dice of prophecy. Flashing through his mind was the data the polymath, Arsenadun and the detectives had gathered from the Harud mycelium volumes. The Harud from 5 worlds had migrated from the southern galaxy to the Sak-Trata abyss. They recorded shadows that blotted out the sky and the sudden appearance of thousands of devils. Traces of Be'lakor. There might be fragments of his holy relics in the southern galaxy. Nimrod's left hand held the massive blade of shadow, its blade hazy, constantly shifting between reality and illusion. The blade of shadow was a divination medium containing even more power. Being most closely connected to Be'lakor, it was a more suitable divination medium than all other holy relic fragments, such as the Eye of Shadow. After the known information flashed through Nimrod's mind, he chanted in his heart. A star map from the Carium Gate to the world where the Be'lakor fragment is located. After chanting it 11 times, he tossed the triangular pyramid in his hand. The triangular pyramid's ascent slowed, as if shadows were pulling at it. The triangular pyramid slowly rose to its highest point and projected an image. As Nimrod memorized the star map, he felt it looked somewhat familiar. His eyes suddenly flashed. A small part of the star map overlapped with what he had previously seen at the War Council. What a coincidence. The destination the star map pointed to was Hoth Albion, one of the star systems controlled by the Forge World, Supremacy Valia. Nimrod stared at the dimmed crystal and said helplessly, "The cooling time is going to get longer again." After his lament, with a thought, he returned to the real world. Nimrod opened his bedroom door and walked toward his office. Suddenly, a buzzing sound rang in his ear. After he pressed the communication bead, Arsene Adun's voice sounded. My lord, Chief Navigator Lady Vischer reports that the Wangquan Shadow is about to arrive at the real-world anchor point. The Astropathic Choir Master reports that the Dark Fire Titan Legion arrived at Glia 5 standard days ago. The second chapter and the 10th battle group have also completed their assembly as planned. I understand. Nimrod then walked down the corridor paved with black onyx. Black spots reflected in his obsidian-like eyes. At the end of the corridor, Etzik, clad in black armor, carried a giant spear slanting across his back that was even longer than his tall frame. Jushin's spear. Etzak's current responsibility was not only to block the prying of the Chaos Gods but also to safeguard Jushin's spear. As a negative Omega class, although he couldn't directly suppress Old Man Huang, the shadow he cast in the warp could make the area around Jushin's spear like a black hole, isolating it from psychic prying. Nimrod did not ascend into the Thelema mindset, allowing the pitch-black halo that suppressed psychic energy to drift around him, his skin occasionally feeling as if pricked by needles. He used the negative Omega class Etzik as a blackstone to wet his will. Nimrod strode toward the bridge, and Etzik silently followed the shining golden mountain. The honor guards standing on both sides of the obsidian bridge felt an intuitive sense of unease. They gripped their weapons, watching the black armor warriors following their father. Etzik was only 2 heads shorter than them, his sturdy frame moving silently like a predatory vulture. The atmosphere of unease spread from the bridge walkway to the command bridge. Wherever the black ring passed, officers' mouths and noses were filled with the smell of copper, their movements became sluggish, and their fingers pulled afterimages under the lumen strips like puppets on strings. Not until the Primarch sat on the command throne and Etzik stood to the right of the throne did the brief unease and panic vanish from the bridge. There were no consoles around the command throne, only Arsene Adun standing there, frowning slightly as he endured the discomfort of the volume's disappearance. Since he became a polymath, the warp imagery had turned into a volume filled with runes. The communication bead in the Primarch attendant's ear buzzed. He raised his hand to press it and then began his report. My lord, we have jumped into the real world. He glanced at Etzik. This time, he didn't have the sensation of the volume flipping rapidly. He could not feel the existence of the Sea of Souls, let alone the crossing from the Imperium through the reality barrier. The voice in the snow-white-haired Arsena's ear didn't stop, and he continued to report. Magos Malavalis reports that, having arrived early, he has adjusted the armor sent by Lord Manusi, and it is ready to be worn. Order him to bring it immediately. After the Primarch attendant conveyed the order, he continued. Glia has initiated the separation procedure. The Chief Forgemaster invites you and the commander of Dark Fire to board the Glia's crown after the fusion reactor is started. I accept his invitation. Nimrod stood up. Open the blast shields. Motors hummed, and the shutters of the observation window rose. Under the servitor's silent command, the machine's spirit influenced the glass, darkening the transmitted light. The Primarch strode to the observation window, arms crossed, observing Glia with interest. The orbital network platforms around the Forge world shifted and moved. Turrets rotated, and missile launch platforms turned. The orbital network platforms displaced and interlaced, aggregating and retracting back to the main forge like a tightening hedgehog. Massive mechanical legs propped up on the planet's surface, supporting the body of an iron spider, Glia's main forge. Void ships circled around, tugboats spat tail flames and pulled steel chains, helping the Glia's crown break free from the planet's gravity. Ant-sized green titans stood between the forge factories. Black smoke belched from the main forge, pouring into the void. While the Glia's crown broke orbit, the main forge continued to roar and operate, ceaselessly manufacturing machinery. Nimrod watched the separation of the Glia's crown until Arsena reported that Malavalis had arrived. 3 solar hours later, Nimrod donned the armor forged for him by Ferrus Manus. He raised his right arm and stretched his body. Clack, clack. Nimrod keenly felt that among the 10 layers of armor plates, the 3rd and 5th layers tugged and stretched, pulling a finger's distance as his arm rose. Malavalis, who had crafted armor for Primarchs like Horus Lupercal and assisted Ferrus Manus in forging armor, stared at the suit in admiration. Lord Manusi personally forged these plates on Terra using the furnaces of the Terrava tribe. He utilized Naro to craft, employed Baroque arc patterns on the breastplate, and used Korit craft for the backplate. The hinged layering technique he used, I believe, must be related to his silver hands, allowing you to stretch your body as needed. Hearing this, the Mentor of Disorder's back collapsed slightly, and his fingertips extended by a finger's length. With a click, the fourth layer of armor plates stretched accordingly. The Mentor of Disorder cautiously and continuously tested the range of his body's stretching. A moment later, Nimrod praised with satisfaction. Ferris's forging skills are superb. This suit of armor allowed his body to expand and contract up to 1.86 times its size. Although it wasn't the 2.3 times limit he could reach after digesting the Mentor of Disorder potion, it allowed him to more fully utilize his Beyander ability of expansion and contraction, compared to before. Wearing the new armor, Nimrod boarded an Aquila shuttle and flew toward the Glia's crown. Chapter 734, Artificial Gravity Well. The massive nuclear fusion engine spewed blinding light, propelling the main forge factory network of Griai, the Glia's crown, to break free from the planet's gravitational pull. The Glia's crown shone in the void, and the towering green machines rotated their bodies, turning towards the same direction. The graceful Aquila shuttle, spreading its wings, shone on countless video screens. Incense burners diffused their scent, the hymns of the Omniscia were sung, and the celebratory anthems echoed through the sound array channels. Lord Nimrod, the favored of the Omniscia, the eternal ally of Glia, the Primarch of the Order Shadows, and the everlasting victor over the enemies of mankind. Sitting in the comfortable leather seat of the black Aquila shuttle, Nimrod overlooked hundreds of steel war machines scattered around the gigantic forge factory. Promethium fuel muddy swamps supplied power to the industrial zone, making the forge factory roar into operation. Little figures in red robes bustled like ants, directing servitors in the mining area and mobilizing precious adamantium reserves. The Primarch's private pilot, Nelson, piloted the Aquila shuttle to the landing pad following the guidance signal. The landing gear lowered, and Nimrod stepped off the deck, accompanied by Etzik and 4 members of the honor guard. 12 sages held incense burners shining with green light, standing on either side. Wilshire, the lord of the 2nd battle group, and Ramsay of the 10th battle group, quickly walked over from between the ranks. Following behind Wilshire was his guard and a black armor warrior wearing a falcon shortsword at his waist. He was slightly shorter than Etzik but much taller than an ordinary person. Biochemical spirit user Ramsay only brought members of the honor guard. The negative Omega class tribe chief stood 500 meters away at the edge of the landing pad area, awaiting his employer's summons. The 2 lords walked up to him, and the ring of unease seemed like 2 colliding water bubbles merging together. The Order Shadows felt a tingling sensation on their skin, and their fervent thoughts receded like a tide. The biochemical spirit user Ramsay felt even more acutely that the flesh and blood candles within his line of sight were rapidly melting. His obsidian eyes, identical to Nimrod's, turned and landed on the black armor warrior behind the Black Emperor, who carried the Jushin spear on his back. The black spears shooting forth made him realize that the untouchables behind the Black Emperor were clearly more unsettling than the ones accompanying him, and their psychic suppression was stronger. Ramsay pushed his Thelema mindset from the 1st layer to the 3rd layer, calming the throbbing needles in his temples, and spoke in unison with Wilshire, who remained in the 1st layer state. My lord. Nimrod nodded with a smile, leading the 2 towards Glia's chief forgemaster. Dago's 12 held the Omniscia scepter, and the sound array generator within his sacred mechanical body emitted an impassioned voice. My intimate friend, this unit thanks the Omniscia for guidance. We meet again. We previously signed the Eternal Covenant aboard your Wangquan Shadow. This time we welcome your arrival at the Miracle Crown. Glia salutes you. The Crown's machine spirit is overjoyed by your arrival. Dagos, it is an honor to accept your invitation. Nimrod said with a smile and admiration. The crown truly deserves the name Miracle. The Glia's crown is a veritable industrial miracle. Wangquan Shadow and other Gloriana-class battleships are sufficient to serve as the battle carrier for an expeditionary fleet, providing support such as weapon manufacturing, but they rely on raw material resupply. Ramirez-class star forts can serve as the fulcrum for an entire war zone, maintaining and supplying the entire fleet, greatly shortening the duration of the war. The Glia's crown, however, is a mobile forge world. As one of the future Empire's 8 largest forge worlds, its main forge network's capacity far exceeds that of forge worlds like Incaladian. It is itself a mobile industrial nation, an industrial complex capable of meeting all needs, even continuing to build warships and titans during wartime. Thanks to the favor of the Omniscia, our sacred covenant, we found fragments of the god of all machines' holy relic fragments in the mortal world from the Orc battle moon. Dagos 12 raised his arm, projecting a green holographic image before Nimrod. The annular device shone with brilliant light, and the underground shaft was filled with mechanical cables. Nimrod gazed at the artificial device displayed by the chief forgemaster for a few seconds. Gravity well. As you can see, the 12 gravity wells deployed by the Crown reduced the separation procedure by 36 hours and 29 minutes. The average energy consumption for Sol system-like void flight decreased by 40.7%. All technical data has been shared, according to the protocol, and delivered to the Forge Lord. Nimrod knew that the reduction in energy consumption for the nuclear fusion reactor supporting void flight depended on the overall gravity within the star system, meaning energy consumption varied based on different star systems and orbits. His eyes lit up. The Orc Artificial War Moon and the Randan Artificial War Satellite were two long-term research projects. Compared to the Artificial War Satellite incorporating psychic technology, the Orcs' idealistic WOG technology is more difficult to understand. The artificial gravity well was the first major breakthrough achieved. Nimrod nodded in satisfaction, one step closer to possessing the ability to construct mobile stellar fortresses. Supreme Warlord Herschler, clad in deep red armor, walked up to Nimrod. Lord Nimrod, Dark Fire, reports to you by order. 94 divine machines await your command. Herschler's face was filled with fighting spirit. News of the King of Destruction, Titan Legion following Lord Horus and winning victories kept returning to Wonquan No. 8. Dark Fire, stationed at the Sacred Forge World, had previously only been sporadically summoned by Lord Nimrod, achieving somewhat mismatched glory. Now, Dark Fire finally welcomed its chance. They were led by Lord Nimrod, the favored of the Omniscia who had recovered countless sacred templates for the Empire. Herschler looked up at the Primarch, who resembled a marble statue, and who was more imposing than the Warmaster Titan hidden deep within the Forge Temple. Herschler, it's good to see you. Nimrod watched the object of corrosion with a smile. After exchanging greetings, he boarded the land speeder prepared for him by Glia and headed toward the iron furnace. Light and shadow flickered in the Primarch's eyes, passing over patches of darkness. His expanding consciousness passed the surrounding roaring hot furnaces and the war machines taking shape in the rising smoke, penetrating a heavy area. It was one of the 12 uniformly arranged gravity wells, where dense generators agitated and collected gravity waves within the confined shaft. The shaft penetrated tens of thousands of meters of strata, ejecting regular repulsive waves on the other side of the Glia's crown. Not bad, relatively stable. As Nimrod retracted his consciousness, the land speeder stopped before an open door. He stepped off the speeder and followed Dagos 12 to the holographic strategic platform in the center of the temple. The tech priests, standing before the constantly clicking machinery, swung their mechanical tentacles, analyzing the scrolling binary code. A huge green holographic image in the central area displayed the celestial bodies of the Iron Halo. Dagos 12 stepped onto the platform, and his mechanical Omniscia scepter shot out a deep green light. The holographic image rapidly zoomed in, displaying dense runes before Nimrod. Dagos 12 retracted his mechanical arm, and the synthesized sound from his chest sound array contained anger. Supremacy Valia poses a huge threat to the entire Iron Halo, as well as Glia. Their hunters raided Nurindi, Horaj. Nimrod cast his gaze toward Nurindi, highlighted in deep green among the 13 marked worlds. He knew this agricultural world was Glia's food supply area, making it crucially important. While he pondered, the chief forgemaster continued the briefing. Currently identified 104 titans belonging to the Reavers, Titan Legion. After Nimrod listened to Dagos 12's briefing, he turned his gaze to Hoth Albion, raising his hand to point at the celestial body marked with deep red runes. I want to know the situation on Hoth Albion. Dagos 12's sound array system answered Nimrod's question 2 seconds later. Hoth Albion is the core territory of the Hydronox Cabal. The Hydronox Cabal is a realm composed of both humans and Xenos. Supremacy Valia destroyed it in a protracted war. Nimrod nodded. Could the Hydronox Cabal have any connection to Belliker's fragments? He speculated internally, then spoke. The 2nd Battle Group and the 10th Battle Group shall act as 2 sharp blades, striking at Nurendi and Horaj. Red and green light flashed in Dago's 12's bionic eye. Nimrod's decision to rapidly strike Nurendi matched the calculation results of his logic engine. He urgently wished to recapture the vital agricultural world and secure the food supply. Morning Star, and Dark Fire, will strike the Reavers. Herseler, you will lead 15 Titans and follow me to Hoth Albion. Herseler's eyes gleamed. I obey your command. P.S. 5 chapters tomorrow. Please vote for monthly tickets and subscribe. Chapter 735, Enemy Ships Falsify Friendly Readings. Tempestus Segmentum, Iron Halo, Horaj. On the bridge of the Blanchette, the flagship of the Supremacy Valia fleet, a massive amount of binary digits suddenly scrolled around Sage FEBRUHEN 25. He stared at the scrolling 0s and 1s, warp energy readings climbing by 36%. Februin 25 watched the warship runes on the holographic interface, his mechadendrites extended, quickly retrieving log records from the cogitator before him. He swiftly reviewed all file records, confirming there was no error in his memory data. No warships had arrived within 16 days. The next batch of reinforcement fleets was expected to arrive at Horaj after 36 on the 16th. Februin 25 did not issue orders immediately. Standard warp travel times were not fixed, and discrepancies of months or even years occurred frequently. He waited for the scan results from the Auspex array. A series of pale green numbers scrolled rapidly. Reading 12 returned, keel tag identification in progress. Result confirmed, friendly fleet. Identified 1 battleship, 4 cruisers, and 13 frigates. Identifying, confirming warship identities. Send a communication request, Februin 25 ordered, then turned his gaze to the holographic screen to monitor the execution of the orbital bombardment orders. His fleet was arranged in an attack formation in high synchronous orbit, a rain of torpedoes streaked toward the artillery arrays below, and a dense barrage of bombardment fire slammed into the missile platforms. Autocannon shells and guided warheads fired by the orbital defense system detonated in the murky yellow clouds, manifesting as a deep red glow. Horaj was still resisting stubbornly. The early arrival of the reinforcement fleet would significantly accelerate the process. Just as Februin 25 was considering coordination with the Allies, a piercing alarm suddenly blared. Countless deep red runes filled the surrounding video screens. Februin 25 hurriedly inspected the myriad warning runes that had suddenly flared up. Streaks of blinding ice blue beams pierced his mechanical eyes. Lance strikes, coming from the Allied warships. The Allied warships that had arrived early. Februin 25's logic link disconnected for 15 seconds amidst a series of error rune warnings before returning to normal. Send a message, remind them that attacking the target is an error. As FEBRUHEN 25 issued the order, he checked the communication logs. The previously sent communication request had received no response. A series of alternating yellow and green lights flashed in his mechanical eyes as he checked the surrounding chronological screens. 1 second, 2 seconds, 25 seconds, the Allied warships did not reply, and a second round of shining beams came streaking in. On the periphery of the fleet, 1 green rune after another flared with red light. Lost the frigate Eastbourne. Battleship Hastings hull damaged, fire on the 36th deck. Februin 25's mechadendrites swayed. The sensor array showed no abnormal communication interference within the Horaj system. The Allied fleet should have received the message, yet they continued their error attack. The 3rd and 4th rounds of strikes followed immediately, attacking relentlessly. Layers of incinerating fireballs spread like a tidal wave around the fleet's periphery, filling the void. Februin 25 stared at the hulls disintegrating amidst the orange-red and bright yellow pulsations. He could no longer allow the reinforcement fleet's error strikes to continue. He roared loudly, his voxcaster vibrating incessantly, "Evade! I will certainly report this to the Council of Sages. I will make you pay for this error." The bombardment fleet of Supremacy Valia turned sluggishly, seeking a way out through the gaps in the mire of wreckage while enduring round after round of strikes. The communication array frequently transmitted round after round of messages, but there was still no response from the reinforcement fleet. Devastating explosions destroyed 38 warships. The Blanchette escaped the death orbit of Horaj's primary planet amidst violent tremors, Februin 25's mechadendrites thrashed angrily like an octopus. Hundreds of surrounding screens were pitch black, crackling with electrical sparks. 94.7% of the fleet's warships had lost contact, and the remaining 5 were suffering from various degrees of severe damage. The losses caused by the reinforcement fleet were more than 10 times the losses in the previous Void battle. Februin 25's mechanical eyes glowed crimson as he stared at the cogitator screen. It was the only thing that could stably provide information about the flagship. Stern thruster array damage, 47.05%. Starboard thruster array damage, 26.19%. Ship's left turn power missing, turn angle capability below the 60% warning line. Bearing 258, Februin 25 hissed, ignoring the rising series of warning runes as he forced the Blanchette to turn. He wanted to make the reinforcement fleet, which had lost its logical discernment, realize what a sacrilegious act it had committed. A deep red rune suddenly streaked across the screen. Boom! The bridge's blast door burst open, followed by the shrieking of rushing air. A fire-fighting servitor raised its mechanical arm, spraying foam-extinguishing solvent. As flames spread rapidly along the cracks in the deck, Sage Februin 25 stared intently at the image that suddenly appeared. A black Gothic warship pierced his mechanical eyes. It was not a Supremacy Valia warship. An enemy ship. Februin 25's brain's cogitator array crashed, with countless contradictory number sequences scrolling. Why would an enemy ship show the same readings as his own side in the reading identification? After 12 cycles of logic iteration in Februin 25's cogitator array, the contradictory sequences resolved into a clear circuit. The enemy ship can falsify friendly ship readings. At the same time Februin 25 reached this conclusion, all the accumulated, inexplicable fallacies were resolved. It wasn't a foolish attack by a reinforcement fleet, but a deliberate attack by the enemy. The enemy ships didn't reply to messages because they couldn't provide the digital keys. Februin 25 realized the terrifying reality of the Black Fleet and simultaneously formed his error report. Had he identified them in time during the second round of enemy fire, about 1/3 of the warships could have counterattacked before being destroyed. Although this would not have changed the outcome of the fleet's destruction, it would have provided enough time to report to the Council. Boom! Februin 25 was thrown by a sudden, violent gust of air, slamming into the metal deck warped by the Melta impact, and immediately lost all signals. On the bridge of the Stinging Rose, the flagship of the 10th Battle Group, Chapter Lord Ramsay stared at the holographic tactical table as 2 red runes, one large and one small, dissipated. He had annihilated the Supremacy Valia fleet without losing a single warship. A corner of Ramsay's mouth quirked, his face identical to Nimrod's. The Phantom device perfectly deceived the enemy ships. The falsified reading device based on Randan ship research was known within the Order Shadows as the Phantom device, a name that intuitively reflected its function. P.S. 5 updates tomorrow. Please vote and subscribe. Chapter 736, 5 updates, requesting subscriptions and monthly tickets. Clash of 3 types of plasma weapons. 3 standard days after the Void War of Horaj, in the orbit of the Agri-world Nalindi. Amidst trails of plasma intertwining with the atmosphere, black drop pods and assault craft poured down from the launch bays of the Order Shadows, 2nd Battle Group Fleet. The drop pods pierced the turbid atmosphere, slamming like raindrops around the blue and red-clad Supremacy Valia huntsmen. After the door opened, Olivier led his honor guard onto Warzone C-15. Olivier took a deep breath. The smell of chemical agents mixed with gunpowder smoke permeated the Agri-world, and even after being filtered through his helmet's Vox grill, the scent remained pungent, yet he felt unusually refreshed. Since the untouchables of the Visa tribe joined his company, the second company commander's nose and mouth were almost constantly haunted by the bitter, metallic stench of copper. Compared to the comfort of breathing pungent chemical gases, what made him feel even better was the absence of the needle-like pain in his temples and the disappearance of supernatural unease. As Olivier took large strides, dense red runes flickered in his helmet's auspex. He immediately marked the enemy and opened the company's Vox channel to issue orders. Attack. Olivier activated his soul sight, locked onto an enemy with a shimmering reddish-gray spiritual body, and raised his Gardinal pattern plasma flintlock. The experimental model in his hand, based on Herud flintlock research, appeared somewhat crude, looking like a smoothbore musket. The Techmarine led by the Forge Lord had limited knowledge of the unfathomable principles bestowed upon the ancient race by the Old Ones, regarding the phase adjustment of plasma bolts between the material universe and the warp. Aside from adaptive amplification adjustments, the only modification was compatibility with Imperial plasma flasks. Wilshire, seeing this firearm capable of firing pillars of fire hotter than a star, had authorized the factories of Gardinal to conduct experimental manufacturing. Olivier steadily pulled the trigger, and a blinding pillar of fire erupted. The plasma bolt hissed through the air, leaving a blurred trail. Flickering in and out of existence, it pierced through the alloy armor of a Huntsman Alpha's mechanical chest. Peesh! Amidst the steam leak, blood mixed with flesh sprayed out. Boom! Exploding fragments tore apart the bodies of 2 huntsmen, and the other members of the Supremacy Valia huntsman squad scattered in panic. That beam, which looked like it might extinguish at any moment, had actually easily pierced the alloy armor of their commander, the Huntsman Alpha. The Forge world they served, Supremacy Valia, had always taken pride in its alloys and plasma. A unique liquid gas mixture extracted from the highly corrosive seawater of Supremacy Valia was used in industrial manufacturing, producing alloys with high strength and resistance to corrosion. The company commander's honor guard followed up, fuel surging into the barrels with a click similar to a bullet being chambered. Red beams generated by Imperial plasma flasks replaced the green beams of the Herud. The flickering, rolling streams of flame became increasingly hot, hitting the armor of ordinary huntsmen and blasting destructive holes through their abdomens. A single volley from the honor guard killed 5 huntsman squads. Amidst the rising gunsmoke, the pitted sensors at the waist of the tech priest commanding the macro clade sounded an alarm. The huntsman's eyelids had long been excised, replaced by goggle-like implants filled with sacred unguents. The collected data was aggregated into the mechanical analysis pack of the radiation sensor. After 2 rounds of data analysis, the tech priest realized that the plasma weapons of the Black Armor warriors were superior to those in his hands. He decided to fully exploit the excellent performance of Supremacy Valia's plasma weapons, especially their unparalleled stability. Skirmish attack. Digital commands quickly reached every soldier in the macro clade. The huntsmen centered around the Alpha commanders, using their alloyed prosthetics that replaced their severed lower legs to scatter rapidly like spider legs. A fierce firefight immediately erupted. Blazing beams crossed paths as the Order shadows of the Second Company raised their Ica Khan pattern plasma guns and advanced steadily. The huntsmen chanted binary hymns as liquid hydrogen fuel was heated into plasma and ejected through linear electromagnetic accelerators. Waves of solar flares surged forth, sweeping over the Black Armor warriors like a rain of solar fire. At the front of the Second Company, the generators of the assault squad's Mark III power armor activated, and the massive Mark II storm shields in their hands glowed with blue light. Amidst the crackling pops, the assault squad members rested their Ica Khan pattern plasma guns on the storm shields and pulled the triggers. Dense spheres of high-energy hydrogen-based plasma cast shining ribbons through the air. The scorching molten flow vaporized the huntsmen's blessed vestments, incinerated their reinforced bodies, and blasted flesh into dust. Constant chirping sounded from the sensors as black smoke and red light filled the tech priest's vision. The Black Armor warriors advanced in defiance of the analytical results. The plasma weapons in their hands did not explode, nor did they even interrupt their firing due to heat buildup. Their plasma guns were just as durable as those of Supremacy Valia. The tech priest stared at the pitch-black barrels. They were much bulkier than Supremacy Valia's plasma guns, with smooth blue arcs of light on the threaded coils. There were no cooling vents at the front of the muzzle to vent excess heat. The tech priest could not understand the creations in the hands of the Black Armor warriors, and could not even be certain if they still fell within the category of plasma weapons. Breathing heavily, he opened the communicator embedded in his bonded respirator and switched channels to call for reinforcements. Olivier commanded the company to advance steadily. The Ica Khan pattern plasma guns, manufactured based on stable and durable squats technology, continued to suppress the Supremacy Valia attack. The Herud phase plasma bolts bypassed the Alpha's alloy armor, forming within the pale flesh and tearing the bodies apart from the inside. As Olivier raised his hand, the magnetic coils emitted a brilliant light, just as the blazing beam flashed and tore apart another alpha huntsman, his spiritual intuition was suddenly triggered. He turned to look at the rising clouds of dust, where blue and red armored vehicles roared toward them. Heavy treads crushed the ridges of the fields tilled by servitors, and blinding light accumulated in the alloy cannon barrels like a rising sun. Boom, boom, boom. In the piercing red light, the blue electrical arcs of the storm shields were ruthlessly torn apart. The massive impact knocked down the front row assault squads. Rising mist vaporized the skin of the Order shadows. The flame stream annihilated reinforced skeletons and melted muscle in two hearts. As the Supremacy Valia huntsmen were on the verge of collapse, they rallied and fired a dense barrage at the exposed Order shadows. Dense beams of scorching light struck the Mark III power armor, the intense plasma energy charring the armor black. Amidst the intersecting plasma explosions, the spines of the Order shadows were torn apart from both sides. Olivier dodged a beam of light and aimed his plasma flintlock at a cluster of 4 red-gray spirits. The howling red beam flashed and hit the blue and red armored vehicle. Boom! With a loud explosion, the phase plasma bolt, which had pierced vehicles like Malkador tanks and Barek battle tanks in testing, failed to penetrate the alloy hull's shield. Notary, Olivier quickly hung the plasma flintlock on his belt, drew his Archiitect pistol, and shouted loudly in Dun language, "I notarize the light of fire." Symbols and magical sigils rose around the notary, one after another, blooming with bright and warm light. Olivier raised his hand and fired a lethal energy ray harvested from the radiation layer of Gardinal's home star. As the ray shot from the muzzle, golden illusory flames instantly ignited out of thin air. These flames exuded the vast, pervasive aura of the sun, merging into a dense ocean. The lethal ray slammed into the energy shield, the blue and red hull shuddered violently, and a fist-sized hole was blasted through the alloy armor. Clumps of golden fire poured in one after another, incinerating the Supremacy Valia crew members to ashes. The notary fired one scorching ray after another, destroying the vehicles. The honor guard strode forward, leading the assault squads to reform the line. Seeing his company rout the enemy, a thought flashed through the second company commander's mind. If the plasma bolts fired by the plasma flintlock could also be layered with the power bestowed by my lord, the lethality would be even greater. Perhaps runes could be engraved, or the plasma flasks could be soaked in solar holy water. P.S. 5 updates today, please subscribe and give monthly tickets. 4 chapters remaining, 2 each at noon and in the evening. Chapter 737, 5th update, asking for monthly tickets and subscriptions. Supreme Warlord of Dark Fire, Lord Nimrod is a god descended to the mortal world. The 10th standard day after the liberation of the Agri-world Nalindi. Wangquan Shadow, Primarch office. Nimrod leaned back on his throne, scrutinizing Herschler, the supreme warlord of Dark Fire, before him. He wore a red and black knight's uniform with a magnificent noble longsword at his waist, and he spoke in standard but slow-paced Vostonian. Lord Nimrod, the god machines of Dark Fire, await your command. Etzik, standing at the entrance of the Primarch office, was in a relaxed state. He already knew that even in a vast battlefield, like the insignificant war on Visa, few could charge to this place. In fact, none ever had. But he remained vigilant, like a hunting eagle, ready to pounce at any moment. Out of the corner of his left eye, Etzik caught Herschler's movement as he knelt on one knee, his eyes flickering. He was clearly different from before, showing an extraordinary level of respect toward Lord Nimrod. Utilizing his brief time in a corner of the officer deck, Etzik had learned from conversations between red-robed tech adepts and others that Supreme Warlord was the title for a Titan Legion's clan chief. He shouldn't be so subservient. Nimrod nodded imperceptibly. Through 3 weeks of standard voyage time, Herschler had been almost completely corrosion. He only needed one opportunity to become completely loyal to himself. During this process, Nimrod confirmed that abilities like majesty and corrosion, which were not related to psychic powers, would not be affected by the untouchables. He also vaguely concluded that after digesting the mentor of disorder, the effect of corrosion, stacked with majesty, was 3/5 more effective compared to a true baron of corruption. This improvement manifested as a reduction in the time required for corrosion. Herschler, Nimrod smiled warmly, the moment you've been waiting for has arrived. Dark Fire descends upon Hof Albion. Your command is the path guided by the holy light of the Omniscia. Herschler's steps were forceful as he boarded the Stormbird, opened his communicator, and issued the order to awaken the god machines. 2 solar hours later, as he stepped into the hangar, he saw the sage holding high the scepter of the Omniscia, surrounded by 120 tech priests praying loudly. Omniscia, behold your great work, the god machines awaken to sweep away the enemy. Win glory, and do not fail Lord Nimrod. Herschler recited silently in his heart. Amidst the drifting incense, he walked toward his blazing glory, looking up at the dark fire Legion emblem engraved on the long banner between the mechanical giant's legs. The roaring flames were reflected in his eyes, and the golden laurel wreaths shone under the illumination of the lumen lamps. Herschler saw the sage walk before him, raise his hand high, and chant loudly. Grant him the power to destroy the enemies of mankind. Awaken, blazing glory. The plasma reactor roared to life, and the pungent smell of engine fuel filled his nostrils. Boom! The door of the god machine opened. Herschler straightened his collar and walked toward the giant foot, surrounded by the crowd. He ascended rapidly along the passage and stepped into the command bridge. The interior chamber of the Blazing Glory's iron head was wide and flat, with numerous consoles embedded layer by layer in the sunken deck of the main passage. Herschler walked to the front of the bridge and sat in the central command chair between the 3 seats. Tech priests in red robes appeared on his left and right, their movements perfectly coordinated as they fitted him with signal-conducting gloves, the sensor particles bonding tightly with his skin. The adept who appeared afterward placed the neural sensing device on top of his head. Supreme Warlord, please remain still. Accompanied by a dull warning, silver metal filaments thinner than hair wound out from the neck restraint ring. Silver tendrils pierced the corners of Herschler's eyes, traveling along the optic nerves into his cranium to interface with the cerebral cortex. A cold pain made him shiver, but he immediately relaxed. Areas of the brain usually left unused were driven in all directions as a vast flow of information merged into his thoughts. The entire giant machine became an extension of his flesh and blood. Herschler let out a satisfied chuckle. Looking down upon all living things, he had become the incarnation of the flame god machine. Only a demigod walking the mortal world like Lord Nimrod could inflict the same blazing fires of war upon the enemy. Whoosh! Flames rose, searing his cerebral cortex. Herschler felt the dissatisfaction of the machine spirit. He is a true demigod. Horus is called the wolf god. I have my doubts about that, but Lord Nimrod is undoubtedly a demigod walking the mortal world. As the transport ship pierced the dim sky with rolling dust and erupting pillars of fire, Herschler could still feel his scalp heating up. The wide door blew open with a roar, and as the braking frame disengaged, he strode forward, taking the lead off the deck. 2 warlord titans followed closely behind him, forming a 3-machine formation. The Blazing Glory took heavy steps, and the shockwaves from its movement vibrated through the bedrock to several kilometers away. The post-hypnotic implants buried deep in his subconscious activated, and a flood of data scrolled within Herschler's eyeballs. Weapons ready, fuel sufficient, telemetry showed enemy targets classified as runes of different colors. Herschler's pupils brightened, narrowing as he locked onto a target. He found a target for the Blazing Glory, a blue and red Supremacy Valia Titan. A god machine of the Reavers, Titan Legion. The moment Herschler tightened his gloves, a thunderous roar erupted from the Blazing Glory's shoulders. Deathstrike missiles whistled out, enveloped in thick smoke as they slammed into the blue and red hull. Cheers erupted from the Blazing Glory's consoles, and the recoil tremors continued to vibrate through the massive head and steel shoulders. Without waiting for the command bridge to stabilize, Herschler flicked his wrists, and the 2 volcano cannons linked to his transmission gloves flared with blinding light. Gyro stabilizers whirled to correct the angle, sending the blinding white laser beams along their set trajectories toward the enemy machine. Amidst the thunderous roar, the warlord titans on either side eagerly joined the attack sequence. Boom! The blue and red Reaver titans' shattered remains scattered in all directions, crashing onto the hard rock and igniting over a dozen fire pits. Herschler let out a soft cry of lingering excitement and took heavy steps toward the direction where thermal signals were rising. The megawatt-level energy released by the volcano cannons and the resulting explosions drowned out the tremors of the earth. Blue and red Rhino APCs were blown into the air, leaving behind scorched black patches in the smoke. The Supremacy Valia alloy fortress disappeared in white steam, as if a mountain had been hollowed out. The blazing glory strode forward as its heavy auspex arrays, spectral sensors, electromagnetic detectors, radar scanners, and echo locators mapped out the entire battlefield area. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. On both sides of the rocky mountain, over 100 artillery platforms turned, and fierce tongues of fire surged forth, covering the sky and earth. Speeding shells repeatedly slammed into the shimmering void shield, producing bursts of explosions. Under the fire of 12 solar auxilia artillery regiments, the blazing glory remained motionless. 6 void shield generators protected the Titan as it calmly launched its counterattack. Whistling missiles tore through bunkers, and white beams of light evaporated entire artillery platforms. As the 3 warlord Titans were relentlessly bombarding the artillery positions, a brilliant blue light suddenly rose from between the mountains. A blinding beam of light hissed as it pierced the blazing glory's void shield, slicing through meters of adamantium armor and damaging the right arm's power system. Divert all power. Restart the void shield. Fall back. Herschler issued the command, and the blazing glory strode back behind the 2 warlord Titans. He examined the report in confusion. The void shield had actually been overloaded in a single hit. Plasma blast gun. After reading the report, he felt even more strange. Plasma weapons were extremely unstable, accumulating heat after a few shots and unable to sustain continuous attacks. No model of the Imperial Warlord Titans used such a weapon. The only weakness of a Warlord Titan was also the plasma reactor protected by the void shield. While Herschler was lost in thought, a piercing red light rose, and the void shield of the dark smoke on his left front overloaded. The Reaver Titan launched continuous attacks. Herschler glanced at the void shield restart progress, 41%. There wasn't enough time. Divert all power to the left arm volcano cannon. The mechanical arm flared with brilliant light, and the breathing on the command bridge became heavy and slow. Just as Herschler was about to issue the attack command, the ether reader suddenly let out a piercing alarm. Warning! Warning! High-energy ether reading, peak. A blinding beam of light flashed across the optical sensors, and a sky-piercing bolt of lightning wrapped around a giant spear descended from the heavens. Boom! A thunderous tremor shook the earth as the blue and red Titan exploded, its flying fragments wrapped in flames crashing to the ground. Herschler's eyes widened as he stared at the golden-winged, black-armored figure that leapt into view. Whether a Primarch could rival a god machine had always been a hot topic of debate within the Adeptus Mechanicus, especially the Collegia Titanica. The mainstream view within Wonquan No. 8 was that a Primarch only stood a chance in close quarters. Now, Lord Nimrod had destroyed a powerful warlord Titan with a wave of his hand. It proved that he could do it. Herschler looked up at the magnificent figure, his voice and heart praising in unison. Lord Nimrod. He is a god descended to the mortal world. The incarnation of the Omniscia. His scalp felt warm, but not burning. The machine spirit of the blazing glory also accepted the Supreme Warlord's words. Chapter 738, 5th release, requesting monthly tickets and subscriptions. 2 chapters are actually this swift. Forge World, Supremacy Valia. Members of the Council of Sages gathered in the Forge Temple, as a series of blinding red 0s and 1s scrolled through their cognitive space. First Expeditionary Fleet annihilated. Agri World Nalindi has fallen. News of the total collapse of the war across 13 star systems erupted one after another within 25 seconds. The modified brains of the sages could not help but fall into a state of paralysis. The 14th message pierced the deathly silence of the hall. Hoth Albion has fallen. This message was particularly eye-searing. Hoth Albion symbolized the glorious achievement of Supremacy Valia's victory over the Hydronox Cabal during a long war. Since then, they would never again bow their heads to any power. Cold reality shattered their illusory thoughts. How can the enemy be so fast? Chief Sage Unai 9 raised the question. Supremacy Valia had not been at a disadvantage during the tug-of-war against Glia over the past 2 years. Why would the situation deteriorate so rapidly in less than 4 weeks? The force calling itself the Imperium of Man has dispatched their outstanding commander, Nimrod, leading his Order Shadows Legion to launch a swift offensive, the envoy sage said in a level tone, relaying intelligence he had obtained through communication with the Mars envoy. Chief Sage Unai 9 looked at the projection of the Dominus Sage. How much longer can we hold out? The Dominus sage, who managed military affairs, stared at the illusory holographic image for 16 seconds before the mechanical tentacles behind him rose, outlining two cyan-red defensive lines on the north and south sides of the image. The Reavers, Titan Legion has been fully deployed to support the Skitarii Rangers. The newly established front is holding back the Order Shadows attack. The Dark Fire, Titan Legion on the southern side and the Morning Star, Titan Legion on the northern side have also been blocked. It is estimated that the southern front can hold for 3 weeks, while the northern front can only hold for 1 week. Sensing the surge of doubt in the cognitive space, the Dominus sage further explained why the northern front was shorter than the southern one. Glia has raised their crown. The tripodal walking mechs of the Order Shadows also pose a threat to our god machines. 1 week is the most optimistic estimate. The Dominus sage gazed at the pitch blackness embedded in the heartland. In all probability, we will not have that much time. The one who broke into the heartland of Hoth Albion is Nimrod and his guard. If he launches an attack on either side, he will tear through our defensive lines from the flank and rear. Everyone. The envoy sage suddenly sent out a thought pulse. I have obtained unverified intelligence that the Order Shadows is their largest legion, and he has only deployed 2 of its 12 chapters. The one in the north with the tripodal mechs is the 2nd battle group, and the one in the south is the 10th battle group. The cognitive space fell into a deathly silence, as the scrolling 0s and 1s froze as if stuck in a cognitive mire. After a long 6 seconds, Chief Sage Unai 9 repeated. 2 chapters. 2 chapters were actually so swift and unstoppable. After another 10 seconds of silence, we shall reconcile with the Empire and accept the jurisdiction of Mars. A wise choice. At the same time, Hoth Albion. Nimrod stepped into the only forged temple on this world. Arsena Dun followed by his side. He led the detectives in accessing all the planetary log documents. After the Primarch attendant aggregated and analyzed all the information, he spoke to report. My lord, this temple was originally the site where the Hydronox Cabal held their round-table meetings. To commemorate their victory, Supremacy Valia built a forged temple here. According to the logs, an ancient statue stood within the round-table meeting site, and every round-table meeting was held beneath that statue. Nimrod nodded and stepped forward, his obsidian eyes taking in the scene within the temple. The furnace fire flickered and died, and incense burners lay overturned on the ground. Nimrod's gaze narrowed, focusing on the gear in the center. The outer red gear meshed with the inner cyan gear. As they rotated, a gray sphere was embedded in the center where the large red and cyan gears overlapped. Thump, thump, thump. In the Primarch's vision, it expanded and contracted incessantly like a heart. In the sight of the Mentor of Disorder, gray-black lines of rules were intricately entangled. Nimrod walked forward, the snow-haired Primarch attendant following closely behind him. He gazed at the gears and noticed that the material of the stone ball was clearly different from the metal gears. The stone ball should have been removed from the ancient statue to reconstruct the gears. Besides commemorating the victory, there seems to be. As he spoke, the cyan-red gears rotated rapidly, emitting a dull thumping sound. Bang! Arsena's face turned pale. He instantly pushed his Thelema mindset from the first layer to the third layer to calm the massive shadow looming over him. The Mentor of Disorders, spirituality surged. He took 1 step and crossed dozens of meters, arriving before the gears. Black mist floated in the palm of his right hand. He raised his arm and reached out, grabbing the vibrating stone ball. Whoosh! The stone ball vanished into thin air. Rumble! The interlocking cyan and red gears seemed to lose their fulcrum and collapsed with a roar. Nimrod nodded with a smile. The third fragment of Bellicor's relic was in hand. The heart of Bellicor. Arsena, with his snow-white hair, looked relieved. He gazed at the gears and the vanished stone ball, lost in thought. A moment later, they boarded a Stormbird and returned to the Aquila shuttle. Through the small observation window, Nimrod gazed at the burning land, where a massive army of servitors was digging Titan drop pods out of impact craters. Within his sight, there were also swarms of ships with excavators, cranes, and transport vehicles, recovering Titans. This was a long project involving countless manpower allocations, logistics scheduling, and key technologies known only to tech priests. The Stormbird slowly landed on the flight deck, Just as Nimrod was about to give the order to rendezvous with the second battle group and crush the northern enemy lines, the communication beat in Arsena's ear buzzed. After listening to the report, the Primarch attendant immediately reported, "My lord, Supremacy Valia has surrendered. They request to sign an agreement with Mars." The corners of Nimrod's mouth curled up. Order the fleet to set sail. Destination, Supremacy Valia. He wanted to arrive at Supremacy Valia ahead of the Mars envoy Sage to subdue the Forge world. "I can't work for nothing and let others take the credit. Besides, Supremacy Valia hasn't truly submitted to Mars." Nimrod remembered that although Supremacy Valia joined the Empire, the unique liquid gas mixture extracted from the highly corrosive seawater of the Forge world was used to create industrial alloys with higher strength, strong corrosion resistance, and excellent plasma performance, which could be used to manufacture war machines for extreme environments. This had caught Mars' attention. Mars then funded Supremacy Valia to vigorously expand its production lines, leading it into a new period of prosperity. But Supremacy Valia still guarded its own secrets closely, and its ties with Mars were not tight. "Since Mars doesn't have the ability to subdue Supremacy Valia, I will take the initiative." While Nimrod was thinking, he returned to the Primarch office and then stepped into the fourth layer of the Nation of Disorder. He extended his spirituality, touching the spiritual orbs of Wilshire and Ramsey. The message he wanted to convey surfaced in Nimrod's mind and was transmitted to the orbs through a subtle connection. "Supremacy Valia has surrendered, cease the attack." For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.